Hana went on and found a psychic and reached out to a psychic to ask about going back to Japan
Wait,
and whether or not
but
whether or not it was a good idea or not. And I was sitting there, kind of nervously waiting for her to come out, just being like, I think that this psychic is going to either make or break this move in the end.
well, that's how close I was to not to do it.
Yeah. And then Hannah came back and was like, yeah, the psychic thinks I should go.
Thank you for joining us. This morning we have Hana Urushizawa and James Howell, who recently moved to Japan. So for Hana, it was moving back. For James, I think it was the first time to move to Japan. So this is definitely an adventure, or it could be also called a venture. So yes, I'm very much looking forward to hearing your story, Hana and James, and listening to you and hearing what was exciting, what was difficult, what were the challenges, and some of the solutions. So let's start without any further delay, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourselves, why you moved to Japan and where you moved from, so that the listeners will have a little bit of background.
Sure. Yeah, we can do that. Hana, do you wanna go first?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me back. I'm from Japan. I moved to Canada when I was 24 and came back this time, I don't know, it's 10 years later. 12, about 10 years later, and from Canada. The reason I personally moved here is because we have a tiny family business, and I happen to be part of it because they didn't have any other option. So I was the last option, and I decided to do that. Plus, I had this personal journey that I wanted to solve for myself and for my life. When I left when I was 24, I pretty much escaped, kind of like a runaway from what I had in my life. And this is my time to kind of reflect and face those again to resolve what I run away from. That's why I'm here. And I'll steal that from James. I'm a rock climber, and I love rock climbing. Pass it down to you, James.
Cool. Thank you. My name is James Howell, and as Hannah kind of alluded to, I'm from Canada. I grew up outside of Toronto, and then Hannah and I lived in Vancouver and Vancouver Island for the maybe few years before we moved to Japan. As Hannah said, I mean, I'm a rock climber. I've been climbing for like 15 years, so that's something that's like deeply part of who I am. And most of the time, you'll see me on YouTube or like reading something. It's often actually climbing related. I'm like deeply passionate about that. And actually being here in Japan, I'm really excited to explore Japan kind of through the lens of rock climbing, obviously through other lenses as well, but I find it to be already a fascinating way to kind of understand and learn the culture and meet people here in Japan. Interestingly, a funny thing about me when it comes to Japan is that I don't mean that I was avoiding the topic or anything. I had nothing against Japan, but I had basically no interest in Japan or Japanese culture prior to meeting Hana. And we met at a personal development kind of workshop thing. And I had met some Japanese people in the past, and I had a couple of friends who were Japanese, but it wasn't really on my radar as even a place to go. So in the kind of 5 years that Hana and I have been together, to now be living here in Japan is fascinating, and there's tons to learn, and I'm currently learning the language, and it's super interesting being here. One thing that's really fascinating about Hana and I being here in Japan is that we have completely different experiences. I mean, obviously we live together, we do most of our stuff together, and obviously we really enjoy spending time with each other. But this is my kind of first time. It's not my first time to Japan. Hana and I have been here before a couple times. We traveled here together. But this is my first time living here. It's actually my first time living outside of Canada. And I would say that I am probably still in what we discussed last time was kind of a little honeymoon phase in Japan. And Hana, obviously, she's lived here. She grew up here. So her coming back to Japan is quite a different experience than what I'm having. Yeah, I think I'll pause there.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, I liked how you used the word, the expression honeymoon experience, because I remember reading somewhere that for people who come to Japan, who move here, there are all those stages of going through the whole experience. And the first one is the honeymoon experience, and then you go through the next stage, and so on and so on. So, of course, and I also appreciate the fact that you mentioned that Hana and you both have different experiences, and you come from very different angles, especially this time when you're both in Japan. So I wonder, between the two of you, before you came to Japan, how did you actually decide to move back? Or, well, for Hana, it was a moving back. For you, it was coming to Japan, actually.
Yeah. Hana, go ahead and share yours, Hana. What was your view coming back?
Going back to my second reasons, I mean, that's actually bigger probably than family business. One day when this opportunity came up, James told me that, whether if you're in Japan or Canada, you're going to have life challenges and struggles as well as happiness, obviously. But, you face different types of life struggles. And that I thought that was very true. And I wanted to give it a shot, to see how this new-ish, I guess it's still for me it's new, but new chapter will unfold. So that was I'm not saying that James made me come here at all. Like that sentence that he said was a big for me. Like, oh yeah, I was about to do the same thing, blaming places to be happy, to decide whether I'll be happy or not. Like, it doesn't matter where you are. So I wanted to try it, coming back and see if I can still be happy with myself. That's how I decided to come.
Yeah, and I think something that Hannah kind of alluded to in there is that I mean, for me personally, I was just down to do it. I thought that it was going to be pretty cool to come over and do something like this. And I was at a point in my career where I was working, and I still do work as a freelance salesperson in the tech space, and also I do sales training as well. And because of that, my schedule is fairly flexible. So I'm actually still able to do some work for Canadian companies while I'm here in Japan, which I do on some mornings. Although I have to admit that I'm spending more and more time learning Japanese now that I'm here. But for me, the decision was a bit easier to just say, yeah, like, let's go and try it. As I mentioned, I've never lived outside of Canada. So to have the experience of going and living somewhere completely different with a different culture, different language, but also a place like Japan where there's a ton of support systems, both from a family perspective, but also, it's in a lot of ways, it's a very easy place to live. The culture can sometimes be challenging to navigate, but it's not. I didn't think it was going to be like an incredibly challenging move, but I also thought it was going to be extremely interesting. So a lot of the decision, it wasn't convincing Hannah to do it, because I was really making sure that if Hannah wanted to come back to Japan, that she would be doing it, that she would be choosing to do it. But I could see a lot of positives with coming and giving it a shot. And also, we knew that, and this is something that I said to Hannah before, is that if it doesn't work out, we can go back to Canada, and we can, or even somewhere else. But that was my decision process on my side, with Hannah as well, of course.
Yeah, it's always important, I think, to keep the door open for other opportunities. And if you think that things don't work out, just move on and look other places to live. Hannah, how about you? I can see your mic is unmuted.
I was just remembering how I was deciding. And when James said, like, oh yeah, we can, pull out the plug if we really, really wanted to. And the other thing that we talked about is I'm stealing James, your words, but we're not type of people that, you sell yourself out completely to be in somewhere. We are self-aware enough to make decisions for respect ourselves, so that's one of the reasons as well. Like, I could probably try it.
Actually, can I also mention a funny thing that went along with it? Because this was actually like a fairly significant, not fairly, it was a thing that happened during this whole process. Is Hannah went on and found a psychic and reached out to a psychic to ask about going back to Japan and whether or not it was a good idea or not. And I remember her going into this room in our house to speak to the psychic, and I was sitting there kind of nervously waiting for her to come out, just being like, I think that this psychic is going to either make or break this move in the end. And
Oh, that's how close I was to not to do it.
yeah. And then Hannah came back and was like, "Yeah, the psychic thinks I should go." Like basically along those lines. And
Yes, she did.
yeah. She's like, "There's something there for you to do. There's something there for you to either learn or discover or do." So,
I know. Just to be clear, I don't just rely on psychic all the time for my life. That was just probably one of the first moments that I did because I was so on the edge. Just wanted to say that for my sake.
yeah, that was funny.
Well, if it is not too personal, may I ask you why you were so much on an edge?
Yeah, I'm definitely open book. So for the whole life until after recently, I felt like my life has been always supported by this, supported by people around me. And when I moved to Canada, I went back to school and I became a counselor, registered, and started gaining my life with myself by myself instead of relying on people, like financially or mainly financially. And I didn't. So I created this new path for me after I left Japan. And that was so hard for me to just give up on. And I'm still a counselor. I still see clients during my days off. And I would still love to see more clients, but I just don't have time because I work other work full time. So that's the reason. So just to make it a little bit short, I don't know if I'm making sense. So because I created this path for me from zero, and I didn't want to give up on that.
Oh, sorry, Maya. I'm just going to throw in, about the psychic thing. I think you probably already have decided. You just need a little bit of a push.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's how people work sometimes, But anyway, can I ask, where are you in Japan? But I wonder if that has, that makes the move easier or not. So, sorry, have you told us, or where are you now?
No, we haven't. So we are in Yokohama area.
Okay.
And we tried last year living in Amori for 3 months, and I was miserable. It's not because of the environment. It's because I was too close to my family. I mean, living with them, with James, with this tall, big, white guy. It wasn't very easy for me to live in there. So, so this time it's a little bit different. Like you said, the place definitely can matter.
I mean, I think Yokohama is a great place, right? They're probably more open to foreigners and foreign culture, and then it's not too far from Tokyo, and it's still not Tokyo, and I think it's a great place. So anyway, thank you for sharing that.
As a former resident of Yamato City, we were 25 minutes from Yokohama Station. So I used to go there a lot, and I really like Yokohama. I just feel more at home in Yokohama than Tokyo, for example. I agree with what Yuka said. I think it's very foreigner friendly relative to other places, but that's just my experience.
Yeah, well, I mean, as Hana said, we did spend some time in Aomori, which is obviously it's up in like the top of Tohoku, like northern Japan, and I quite like it up there. I mean, it's very relaxed, and the food, especially the seafood, is like really really good. But I am very happy here. I would say in Yokohama. I actually like that you are close to Tokyo. I've actually spent like very little time in Tokyo, I have to say. I spend a lot more of my time here in Yokohama, and I find Tokyo to be extremely cool. It's like really, really interesting. And I think that maybe, like, I'm 36 years old now. If it was 10 years ago, I think I probably would have been all about Tokyo. But at this point in my life, I do just intuitively like the vibe of Yokohama a bit more. We don't live right downtown. We're also about 30 minutes by train away from downtown. We're in an area called Kohoku Newtown. And
very specific, James.
Yeah, very specific. But it's like a little bit more relaxed, I find, and especially coming from Canada. I don't know. I like the vibe of Yokohama quite a bit. I find it there's tons of amenities. There's everything that you would need and more, and you can access everywhere pretty easily. But at the same time, it just has, I feel, a little bit more of a relaxed vibe. There's still a lot of people here, but it's just a bit more chill.
Definitely chill.
Yes, it is. It's a very international city. It's a beautiful city, and I think that there are a lot of foreigners there too who give that that vibe to the place. But so if you don't mind me asking, then so what are the things after coming back to Japan? And James, for you, after coming to Japan, you said that you liked Yokohama and the city, how it feels and so on. But what are some other things that you like about being here?
The first thing that comes to my mind is I really love walking. I like to go for a walk every day, just like a sampo, just like a nice little walk. And I think that Japan is probably like the number one place just to go wandering. I've like come to recognize that just the way the streets are laid out, and there's like parks, and you could walk every single day and do a different walk every single day when you live in a place like here, probably Tokyo, and probably many places in Japan. So I just love exploring, and I think that you can do that endlessly here in Japan, not even with anywhere really specific to go. So that's one thing that I just really love doing here in Yokohama. Another thing that I would say is, of course, I think the food it's obviously fantastic. I think anyone who comes to Japan just immediately, especially coming from North America, just recognizes how the food culture is different, and they really care. Japanese people really care about giving an experience really with food. They're extremely passionate about it, and I like cooking. So since coming to Japan, I've been cooking a bunch. Hana also loves cooking. So whether we go to the grocery store and we get a bunch of seasonal food, I love how it seems like the food is almost more seasonal here as well. When you go to a grocery store in Canada, you can almost get the same stuff throughout the whole year because it's mostly imported. Whereas here, I noticed that things kind of change seasonally, and I think that that's really neat. One other thing as well I have to say is that being a climber here in Yokohama, there's a lot of climbing gyms. And I mean, for me personally, anytime that I've traveled, I've found that climbing has kind of been my guiding light to meeting people and making new friends. And I mean, I think that this is really across Japan. I mean, when we were in Aomori, people were super friendly. But here in Yokohama, I found people to be really friendly. And I've met a bunch of friends already at the climbing gym, which is great. And I'm learning Japanese, so to be able to go to a place like the climbing gym where I hang out with a bunch of people all the way from like 7-year-old children up to people in their 60s and 70s who are there climbing, and I get to speak to them in Japanese. We also speak in English sometimes, but it's just really fun. I really like that. And actually, I know that you've mentioned a few times how there's so many foreigners in Yokohama, and we actually live really close to like a German company that is pretty nearby. So there's quite a few, like there's a big German population here. But at the same time,
New town and German company. Come on, James.
yeah.
They'll know William. Sorry, go on.
Okay, so but either way, it's just nice to be able to. I haven't actually made a ton of foreigner friends. I actually would quite like to, but I do just find that it's fairly easy to meet people here and do a lot of the things that I enjoyed doing in Canada, and then but just do it in a completely different place and in a new context.
Well, that's wonderful to hear. And how about you, Hana? Are there any things that you find are better now than they used to be?
Yeah, I think that people that I met here, not like people I used to know, people I met completely new, I find it they're a little bit more understanding in differences between Japan and other countries. And I don't feel that like a lot of energy from them saying that Japan is the best. I don't find that as strong as before. And because they're understanding of that topic, I feel like I feel a little bit more understood that, like it must be different for you, or it must be interesting for you, or I get that like a empathy from people.
Yeah, I can say that I have. Yeah, I think that the Japanese are very empathetic, and maybe it's maybe my view is in the minority, but I have also written an article about that, and I think that it is part of the culture. Because when you live in such small communities, let's say very closed communities, you actually do not have to talk all the time about what you feel, or you don't have to explain yourself. And to this point, it is like the people in those communities, they basically assume, don't assume, but they actually read the signs, the sublime signs that are there, and they more or less can read the room. So I think that this has happened or helped them develop that empathy to others. And of course, I know that the empathy I'm referring to is probably different from the empathy we, the foreigners, expect to have or to see. And there are different levels of it. But however, I'm happy to hear that you really have found that there is more empathy than there used to be, and that, basically, there are things that you enjoy better nowadays than you used to. And also, so are there any things that you find more difficult than before?
Yeah, so this is completely personal, or for people who lived outside of Japan, and also being with somebody who is not Japanese. And I find it can be challenging. It's not always, because I know different ways that the companies are running outside of Japan. I find it's a little bit frustrating to follow the rules. This is like a classic challenge that you face in Japan, I guess. And also being with James, people want to talk to me a lot more than they're, open to talk to James. It's not like they don't want to talk to James, but they immediately see between us, like, okay, she understands me and he wouldn't. So that's kind of been challenging when we go to like City Hall, for example. I'm writing lots of, pieces of paper, and I've written my names, James' name, addresses many, many times because obviously James can't write. So that's kind of challenging.
That's interesting because when I have to do some paperwork here, usually the clerks are very apprehensive, and they believe that foreigners are not really that skilled in writing kanji characters. And in the beginning, it was true. In the beginning, when I came here, it was true, and I believe it's true for everybody who has been here for a while. But eventually, when I became a little bit more confident in my kanji writing skills, I started going to the yakusho, that's the word office, by myself. So they didn't actually have any chance but to give me the pen and ask me to write the address and name and everything by myself. So that's one of the ways I just did it, and I believe that James will be able to do that pretty soon too.
Yeah, I mean, writing is really challenging, I find, and it should be when you're learning. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of people on the call here who have learned Japanese and are much further ahead than me. And I just find that right now, what I'm focusing on is speaking, listening, and reading. And ultimately, writing Japanese is like pretty far down on my ladder, it seems like, of things that I intuitively feel are important. I know how to write hiragana and katakana, and I know how to write a few kanji. I know how to read far more kanji, but it just feels like when I sit down to practice writing kanji, it's like the only thing in Japanese study right now that doesn't excite me and doesn't really interest me. So it's very hard. It's very hard to believe that I will be able to get to that point at some point. And I've also made that pretty clear. I'm in Japanese school now. I've made that somewhat clear with my teachers in some ways to let them know that don't let me get away with not doing it, I guess, because I'll probably take every opportunity I can to avoid writing kanji. And also, just to quickly go along with what Hana was saying, in terms of difficulty, I mean, going to the city office is, we've been there so many times now. It is just, it's honestly, at this point, I find it impressive, like the amount of paperwork and things like that are going on, and the amount of people that are there. I'm so grateful that I get to go with Hana, because I'm sure it'd be pretty tough to navigate that if you were on your own as a foreigner without like a pretty strong grasp of the language. But it's also like a necessary place to go. And same with the bank, although, it was pretty cool is the last time we went to the bank, going to the bank takes a really long time, it seems, no matter what you do. There was the baseball, like the final game of the baseball World Cup was going on, and we didn't know where they were playing it, so we weren't watching it. But we went to the bank, and they were playing it at the bank. So we ended up just hanging out at the bank and watching the baseball finals against the state right up until the last pitch. It was really fun.
I was holding
That
it.
is.
Sorry, go ahead, Jim.
That's hilarious. That's so funny.
Yeah, it is. And James, one thing, I agree with you about what you said, that basically writing kanji characters should be, the last concern or the last thing you try to do. Just one, you don't have to, you actually don't have to learn to write too many characters to be able to go to the city office and do the paperwork by yourself. What you need there is you need to be able to write your name in katakana and also write your address in kanji characters. And most of the time that will suffice because everything else is written there. You just need to be able to read what is written on the forms. So yeah, definitely. And just once again to the point you made about the order, how you're now learning to speak Japanese and read Japanese, that's very important. The other day I actually saw somebody write on LinkedIn that you need to learn how to use the language, not only how to basically read and write it, because using it is probably it comes first, so that because of the differences in cultures and the specific usages of expressions and so on, it is really it is essential how to and when to use those expressions so that you don't sound that very strange.
Yeah, well, thank you, and I appreciate your thoughts on the kanji. That's something that I've had in my mind. I'm like, I need to memorize that address, and I can write my name. Although, if you were to ask me to do it right now, I would be nervous. But those are two things I do need to definitely practice and just figure out how to do confidently. Um, and Yeah, I think that when it comes to those kind of cultural pieces, that's definitely been difficult in some regards. You do definitely, what I've also recognized is that as a foreigner, especially as a foreigner, when people can tell that I'm fairly new here, they do give you quite a long leash, and people are very empathetic to you, to your trying to speak the language and navigate what's going on here in Japan. And I think that anyone who's been here for quite some time, they hear things like like Nihongo Jozu. People were saying that to me like when I only knew how to say a few things, and it almost seemed at one point like it was insincere. But I actually don't think it is. I think that a lot of Japanese people, they don't have an expectation that you can speak any Japanese, and I do think that a lot of people are just appreciative to be trying and to go for it. And the other thing too is that a lot of people here, I think, are Japanese people are interested in speaking English as well, and they want to practice speaking English, which I'm totally open to. I think that it's not fair to me to expect that I'm just going to speak Japanese with everybody. And if someone replies to me in English, it might be because they also recognize that I'm English. They might be thinking that they're helping me out. They also might want to be practicing their their English. So I do, and actually this is even something at the climbing gym I like to offer to people is I always go for Japanese first. And sometimes I'll have conversations with people where I speak Japanese and they respond to me in English. And we just kind of have this back and forth conversation in that way. But I do think it's kind of a bit of a give and take with the language where it's only fair, I think, to, be or to offer the English practice as well, which I think a lot of people want to do. Yeah.
About the sort of languages, I think Imayan and I may be referring to the same article in LinkedIn. How the simple translation is going to be done by ChatGPT or something equivalent. But sometimes language can carry a lot of cultural differences. And then you guys, James, you're in Japan, like experiencing, the differences in custom, and so you probably have the many ways ahead of. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I don't mean to compare you to AI, but anyway. So I think you have a huge advantage. But anyway, now I was dying. I was dying to ask Hannah because Hannah, I think I remember hearing your talk or presentation earlier somewhere. But my impression is you sound much happier. So I wonder, what has changed. I don't know when I have a chance to talk and listen to you, but I can hear distinctly your tone is much more happier. So can you share as time progressed? Your stay had become longer back in Japan. So is that like something changed in your life, or again, if you don't want to get into too much private issues, and please just skip this question. But if you could, thank you.
Yeah, especially maybe because last talk when I was on Maya's channel, that was 4 p.m. in Canada, and this is 8 a.m. in the morning.
Okay.
So
okay.
that might be that might be part of it. But it's sharp listening because I am going through a little bit of tough time because we just moved here. So And also, I have to mention that 4 days before we moved here, I fractured my ankle and I couldn't walk for like, what, 3 months, James? And that made my life extremely challenging on top of the move and then all that. So I'm just about settling into new place and, navigating my full-time work and my part-time for my passion of counseling. So I am going through a little bit of juggling and life challenges. I wouldn't call them issues, but really not a, stable time right now. So that might be something that you're picking up on.
Thank you.
That you mentioning that, Hana, that's also just a thing that was pretty wild about our move to Japan. As Hana said, we were at the climbing gym on Vancouver Island 4 days before we moved here, and Hana, fractured her ankle, so she was off her feet for the whole travel, us arriving, moving into the new house, all that type of stuff, and that made things very challenging right at the start.
That was wild.
That was wild. It was just almost like we were both in a state of shock for for a little while about that. But in some ways, it actually forced me, I think, to get out and do more at the start that Hana would have likely done, but she wasn't able to do. So kind of right away, I was going to the stores and things like that. But man, every time that we mention that fracture, it just reminds me, because I forget about it. Hana's pretty much fine now, but I just forget about it. And then that was a really challenging thing to happen before this move.
Yeah. And I'm sitting at home, and James has to go in and get everything for the new house, and James didn't know anything about it. And then we wanted the toilet paper. He came back with kitchen paper with a broccoli picture on it. It's like, James, this is not toilet paper. Anyway, I thought that was funny. And also, James came back with this 2000 yen ladle, and I was like, you can get it in dollar store. Anyway, that was kind of like a funny part. James going his adventure, driving his new, different size, and finding his ways to, create this new life here.
Yeah, well, isn't that the what's the show where you send the little kid to the store alone and the cameras follow them?
Old enough?
So that
Old
was
enough.
James, the adult version.
Hajimete no Otsukai, yes.
Yeah.
Hajimete no Otsukai or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
If it had been if I had been mic'd up during that, there would have been a lot of like beeping from me, kind of swearing under my breath, constantly being confused of what was going on.
Well, that's how you create memories, so that you can laugh
and learn
too.
Definitely.
Yeah, no, totally,
Yes.
absolutely. I mean, looking back, it is officially at that point in the memory now where it's all good. And even I have to say, at the time, I'm kind of proud of myself that I did early on. After that kind of shock and just the bummer of it all, and obviously really feeling for Hana, she was in a lot of pain. She was totally immobile. That was not how she wanted to re-enter Japan. But we both kind of just, pulled our socks up and got it done. So it all worked out. And
I really, really appreciate you, James.
I'm in awe of your toughness. Like, look at what you guys got through. That's amazing.
Sounds like you guys are a good team.
We are a great team.
Yeah, definitely.
That's sort of leading to my question. And so, Maya and Tim is yes, I'll be quiet after a while. Okay, don't worry. Anyway, so my husband and I moved from California to Texas, and then we haven't heard too many good things about Texas before I moved, so we're sort of worried. But after the move, and the Texans are much nicer than I had sort of expected. And then besides that, I think it's because I wasn't alone. I had my husband to make a move and then get, sort of acclimated in this, Texas weather and culture. That made a huge, that was a huge help because I wasn't alone. So I'm just curious, because you are a good team and you made this move together. Is that a sort of like, the secret to sort of like a smooth and successful, like a sort of move to Japan? What would you two say to that?
Should I go first?
Go ahead.
I would say it's 100% yes. I couldn't have done this without James, especially given that, I had a broken ankle, but not because of that. It's just a constant emotional roller coaster that happened, still happening, kind of sometimes. Still, you have to go through that transitioning your life, meaning you're saying bye to things that you had, and you have to adapt new things. And when you do it by yourself, I feel like it can be harder because you don't have a lot of sandboarding and get support. And I luckily had that from James. So I would say that's 100% true. Made my life easier.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much to add. I think that's it. We definitely have each other's backs, and there's ups and downs. Obviously, like we don't. I don't think anyone has a perfect relationship, and there's definitely been sometimes that have been pretty stressful. But at the end of the day, I think that we both know that we both are very empathetic to each other's kind of experiences here, and I think that we both kind of communicate when we need to about things that aren't maybe going the way that we want it to, or maybe an expectation that kind of isn't met, or something like that. So, um, I would agree, though. I mean, I think if I was on my own, I don't think it would be as healthy of a transition as it's been so far. But at the same time, I have to say that. I think that even if you were to be doing it on your own, I think that an important thing to work on early on is maybe seeking out some other people, or that type of support system that you need here, whether that's like calling your friend. I've actually found that since I've been here, I've actually been talking quite regularly with friends back home, and that's been pretty beneficial, just like having chats with people back home, and staying in touch. I find that like mentally that really helps. So I think that having some type of support system, whether it's with your partner or the people when you arrive, and trying to work on making new friends even when you're here, all of that stuff I think adds up.
I was just thinking what you said. You said, James. Like when I moved to Canada, I was by myself completely, and when I had to go through the paperwork that I was talking about by myself, and that was hard. But at the same time, it's a lot of learning learning about yourself, how you would like to do it if you're yourself. And like you said, James, it's what's really helped me was creating a friendship and putting yourself in a community where you might not understand the language very well, but just keep smiling and create this connection other than just language. And that really helped me when I moved to Canada by myself. So that's probably might be happening to you.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Hannah. James, I really like the way you both of you have come here with intention and self-awareness. When I came here, I had none of that, but I was young. But I really like how you've done it. And James, you took what is within your control and what is authentically you, and you came up with get into the rock climbing community, and any type of activity where you can mingle with the local population, in this case Japanese. You're in essence creating the conditions in your life where, one, you can connect with people, which in turn your Japanese gets better. It enriches both of you. It's like you created those conditions to make that possible. And again, when you're doing an activity, it could be bowling, it could be dancing, it could be anything. It makes it easy for both sides to relax because you got something to focus on, in this case, rock climbing. But then it also makes it easy to relax and chat and develop those relationships. So I hats off to you for being so intentional. And I think you've done it the right way.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. And I definitely, I mean, I admire when I look at you and the relationships. I went to the event with the music event that you were part of, and I just think it's amazing what you've cultivated. So I appreciate hearing that from you, just based off of what I've seen about you. And I have to say, actually, one thing to go along with that in terms of making friends that I've really taken on, I would say, in the past, even prior to coming to Japan, and something I just recognized that as an adult, when you're making friends, sometimes you have to make the first move. You know what I mean? Like you just,
Definitely.
and if you meet someone, and I'm not saying right away, I'm not saying that you should immediately be asking somebody for their number or something like that, or their contact online or whatever. But let's say that you have met that person and you think that I know this sounds almost like dating, but you think that you click, and you're enjoying chatting with them. It's so easy for that to happen. And then how many times has that happened? And then you're like, oh, I wish I had got that person's contact info, or I wish that I, maybe added them on LinkedIn or something like that. And I feel like I still go through times where I don't do that, but I feel like I'm getting better at just, taking the shot of being like, hey, do you want to exchange contact info? Maybe we could do this again, like go climbing again, or, meet up at the next event or whatever. And every time that I've done it, I think that I've been happy with myself to have taken that step of, being a little bit vulnerable and putting yourself out there, asking if this person wants to be your friend, basically.
Maybe you need to have just a meishi, and just hand it over to them if you want to give your information, and they'll, if they want to give it back to you, they will. That would be another way to deal with it.
I actually don't know that term. Can you tell me what is that?
A meishi is your business card. Which is still very popular here.
Okay, cool. I'll consider that. Thank you.
That's a great idea.
I had a meishi when I was in college, just to introduce myself, and I was also teaching eikaiwa at the time, so I used it for that as well. But it just came in handy because it's all written down and it's part of the custom. And
that's a brilliant idea.
Yeah, it implies that maybe you would like to get their information, and if they have a meishi, they'll probably give it to you. Anyway, just a thought.
Love that. I forgot that part. I mean, I have one from work, but I don't really want to give to many. But I think I can use that as this is. Yeah, I forgot that part of culture that people give away in a private setting.
Yeah, if you don't want to give them your information, just pretend you don't have a meishi. Find a way out.
So, but yeah, I think it's a great way actually if you like the people you meet and make them remember you too, because sometimes I guess that people are busy, they tend to forget or they mishear your name or something like that. So having one ready definitely helps.
I'm gonna do it. That sounds fun.
Great.
What did you say?
So, James and Hana, you're both rock climbers. So, are there many facilities in Yokohama or facilities near your place that are easy to find?
Yeah, there are a number. I would say that probably in Yokohama, there's got to be at least 20 climbing gyms, would be my guess. Very close to us, there's one, and it's actually in a mall, and it's great. Honestly, the people who climb there are amazing and just super friendly people. And the owner is a really interesting person. They also run lessons on various days of the week. So yeah, I found it really, really easy. Actually, Japan has quite a strong climbing culture, and there is a World Cup for rock climbing. It's called the IFSC. It's actually kicking off next week, and it's an international competition. But the first one is actually in Hachioji, and it kicks off next week. Hannah and I tried to get tickets, but we couldn't get them. But Japan is crushing it on the world stage. Like, they are winning a lot of the competitions, and Japanese rock climbers are super strong and really good. So in most places in Japan, there are climbing gyms, and I find climbers generally. I find it to be a really inclusive sport and a fun sport, whether you're new at it or you've been doing it for a long time. No, it's not competitive, in comparison to some other sports. So when you're just going and climbing on your own, so. Yeah, I know this is actually all of a sudden turning into an advertisement for rock climbing. I apologize, but it is great. You can find it in most places in Japan. We found it really easily.
I had no idea. You mean you said the World Cup for rock climbing, you said?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's popular in Japan? Sorry. Now, okay. I'm learning a lot from this room. Thank you.
Yeah, me too. This is fascinating.
Yeah.
I love the rock climbing part. But on the other hand, it almost doesn't surprise me that Japan's really good at it, So I guess it makes sense, but it's something that's, like Yuka, it was new to me. I had no idea.
It makes why you think the Japanese are good at it? It just why? To me, it takes a lot of physical strength, right?
Oh, yeah, but Japanese, they have certain, just because you might be smaller in stature doesn't necessarily imply that you're not good at certain things.
Okay.
And Japanese people are when they get into a sport or any hobby, they tend to be very serious about it. Like they're all in, whatever they do. And also it's a culture that exalts the idea of endurance and gamma and pushing beyond your limits. So it fits with some of those, what were traditional, I think, values in Japanese culture. So
okay, I'm not a typical Japanese. Okay, all right, I'm learning.
Yeah, you're not typical. I'm not typical American, so that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think actually the second thing that Tim said there about there is definitely a culture that I've recognized in Japan around when people get into something, they really get into it. It seems like it's the only thing that they focus on. Whereas in North America, people might have like multiple different passions they split their time across. But the way I've heard someone describe it is that in North America, North Americans go rock climbing in order to go and climb and kind of have fun, and maybe some people are focused on improving. But in Japan, people go rock climbing and their intention is to get better at rock climbing. And out of that, they're producing some of the best rock climbers in the world. And actually, right now, the number one female rock climber, is named Mori Ai, and she's incredible. Hana can tell you probably more about her because she likes to study the stats about the person. But she is beating everyone in everything, and she's just a fascinating kind of person.
Well, thank you. I believe that we can have a separate room about rock climbing in Japan, because I have watched several TV programs here introducing Japanese rock climbers, and they have been fascinating because those climbers, especially for the programs, they were asked to perform some interesting climbings, inside buildings, basically, not on walls, but within shops or offices and so on. And it was fascinating to watch. And Tim, as you said, I think that basically having a smaller stature may be even beneficial when you need the power, of all the muscles in your body. I mean, that body weight, you don't have to carry it all around when you climb. But of course, I'm not a specialist at all, and I know very little about rock climbing. However, so Hana and James, thank you so very much for being our guest speakers today. It was a fascinating conversation. And Hana, I'm happy to say the same thing that Yuka mentioned earlier. You sound much happier than you did last year when we talked. And I hope that this will become even more true. I mean, that you will be happier and happier here in Japan. So you'll find your place and maintain it, keep it the way it is. James, thank you for the support you give Hana. Thank you for the positive attitude too, because we definitely need positive attitude when we move to a new place. And well, Tim, I can see that you are unmuted.
Yes,
so...
I just wanted to, thank you, Maya, for the closeout. I just wanted to add that, Hana and James, I've been rooting for you guys from the beginning, since we first started communicating. And I think I speak for I think everyone in this room is rooting for you. So if there's anything I can do in any way, let me know. I'm happy to support you guys. And I think Maya would say the same. And again, I think everybody here, our community. So thank you.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. I can feel the support. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Well, just now, I wish you all a happy Wednesday, midweek, and we'll be here once again on Wednesday at 8 o'clock when we'll have Frank Martin with us. So that's all. Have a great day, and we'll talk again soon.